The unbelievable encounter. Jack had seen many strange things in his life, but this was something beyond belief. He was just a simple miner, digging through rocks and dust on a remote planet called Zeta 4. The place was a wasteland, filled with endless mountains and deep caves. He had come here with dreams of finding rare minerals and making a fortune. But after months of hard work, all he had found was disappointment. His savings were running low, and soon he would have to leave with nothing. But everything changed on that one fateful evening. A mysterious discovery. Jack was returning to his small shelter after another failed day of digging. The twin suns of Zeta 4 were setting, casting a red glow over the barren land. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and sighed. Maybe it was time to give up. That's when he saw her. Lying near a pile of broken rocks was a girl. Not just any girl, she was alien. Her skin had a faint silver-blue shimmer, and her hair was a glowing shade of violet. She wore a sleek, metallic suit that looked more advanced than anything Jack had ever seen. For a moment, Jack just stared. Was she dead? Injured? He carefully stepped closer. Her chest was rising and falling. She was breathing. But she looked weak, as if she had been running from something. Jack hesitated. Helping an alien could be dangerous, but something about her seemed helpless. He couldn't just leave her there. A strange encounter. He bent down and gently shook her shoulder. "Hey, can you hear me?" The girl's eyes fluttered open. They were a bright, glowing gold, like molten metal. She gasped and tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. She looked at Jack with fear and confusion. "It's okay," Jack said, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I won't hurt you." She didn't seem to understand his words, but after a few moments, she relaxed a little. Jack sighed. "Great. Another problem to deal with," he muttered. He couldn't just leave her here, and if she was in trouble, he needed to know why. Carefully, he lifted her up and carried her back to his shelter. An unexpected surprise. Jack's shelter was small and simple. Just a few metal walls, a power generator, and a tiny cot where he slept. He placed the girl on his bed and fetched some water. She took the bottle and drank it eagerly. Jack sat down across from her, trying to figure out what to do next. "Who are you?" he asked. The girl tilted her head, then spoke a few words in a strange, musical language. Jack frowned. He had no idea what she was saying. "This is gonna be difficult," he muttered. The girl pointed at herself and said something again, slower this time. The only word Jack could make out was Lena. "Okay, Lena," Jack said. "I'm Jack." He pointed at himself. Lena nodded slightly. At least she understood that much. They sat in silence for a while. Jack could see that she was exhausted. He decided to let her rest and figure things out in the morning. But then something very strange happened. Gold coins. A little while later, Lena got up weakly and looked around. She seemed uncomfortable, like she was looking for something. Jack watched as she slowly walked toward the small bathroom in the corner of the shelter. He shrugged. "Guess nature calls, even for aliens," he muttered. He lay back on his cot, trying to process everything. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why was she out there alone? Suddenly, he heard a soft clinking sound from the bathroom. Jack frowned. What was that? He sat up, listening closely. Another clink, and another. It sounded like coins dropping. His curiosity got the best of him. He stood up and walked toward the bathroom door. "Lena," he called. "Are you okay?" No response. Jack hesitated, then gently pushed the door open. What he saw made his jaw drop. Right there, on the floor, were shiny gold coins. Jack's heart pounded. Where did these come from? He looked at Lena. She looked embarrassed, avoiding his eyes. Then the realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. She had produced them. Jack staggered back. No way. That's not possible. Lena just stood there, shifting uncomfortably. Jack stared at the gold coins on the floor. They were real. He picked one up, testing its weight. It was heavy. It was pure gold. His mind raced. If she can do this, she's worth a fortune. But before he could say anything, the ground suddenly shook violently. A distant explosion echoed through the air. Lena's eyes widened in panic. Jack rushed to the window and saw bright lights in the sky. Something, or someone, was coming. And they were looking for her. The alien's secret. Jack's heart pounded as he stared out of the small window in his shelter. In the distance, flashes of red and orange lit up the sky, followed by deep, thunderous rumbles. Explosions. Something, or someone, was coming. He turned back to Lena, who was gripping the edge of the table, her glowing golden eyes filled with panic. She understood the danger, even without words. Jack's mind raced. He barely knew this girl. He had no idea where she came from, why she was here, or why she was capable of something as insane as producing gold coins as waste. But he knew one thing for sure. If someone was looking for her, and they were blowing things up to find her, she was in big trouble. And now so was he. A dangerous decision. Jack grabbed his old rifle from the corner of the room. It was rusty and barely worked, but it was better than nothing. He turned to Lena. "We need to move. Now." Lena didn't understand his words, but she understood the urgency in his voice. She nodded quickly. Jack threw a few supplies into his bag. Food, water, some tools. He wasn't sure where they were going, but staying here was suicide. As he reached for his mining scanner, his eyes landed on the pile of gold coins still lying on the floor. He hesitated. This could make me rich. For a moment, greed pulled at his thoughts. He could take the coins, sell them, and live like a king. Maybe he didn't even need Lena. Just the coins would be enough. But then he looked at her. She was trembling, eyes darting to the door. She wasn't some gold-making machine. She was terrified. Alone. In trouble. Jack gritted his teeth. "Damn it," he muttered, pushing the coins aside. No time for greed. He grabbed Lena's hand and led her toward the exit. The hunters arrived. The night air was cold as they stepped outside. Jack's shelter was perched on the edge of a deep canyon, surrounded by rocky cliffs and winding paths. In the distance, a massive black ship hovered above the desert, its engines glowing ominously. Figures in dark armor were moving across the land, scanning the area with glowing red visors. Bounty hunters. Jack cursed under his breath. If these guys were here, it meant someone had put a price on Lena's head. A big one. Lena squeezed his hand, her body trembling. She pointed toward the canyon below, gesturing frantically. "You want to go down there," Jack whispered. "That's a dead end." She shook her head and pointed again, desperate. Jack sighed. He didn't have a better plan. The bounty hunters were getting closer. If she had an escape route, he had to trust her. "All right, let's move." A hidden power. Jack and Lena climbed down the rocky slope, careful not to make any noise. The canyon walls loomed high above them, casting deep shadows. The only sound was their heavy breathing and the distant hum of the bounty hunter ship. As they reached the bottom, Jack noticed something strange. The walls of the canyon were covered in golden veins. Real gold. He blinked in shock. Gold wasn't supposed to be this common. Not on this planet. Lena placed her hand on the rock and closed her eyes. A soft, golden glow spread from her fingertips, and the veins in the rock shifted. Jack took a step back. What the hell? The rock moved. A section of the canyon wall opened up like a door, revealing a hidden tunnel. Jack's jaw dropped. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" Lena grabbed his arm and pulled him inside. The stone door sealed shut behind them, leaving no trace of their passage. Just seconds later, the sound of heavy boots echoed above them. The bounty hunters had arrived. The truth about Lena. Jack and Lena walked deeper into the tunnel, their path lit by the faint golden glow in the walls. The air smelled of minerals and something ancient. After several minutes of silence, Jack finally spoke. "All right, Lena. I think it's time you tell me what's going on." Lena turned to him, her face conflicted. She seemed to struggle for words. Then, slowly, she raised her hand and pressed it against Jack's forehead. Jack's vision flashed white. Suddenly, images flooded his mind. A grand city of golden towers, floating above an ocean of stars. A people who lived in harmony with metal, shaping it with their thoughts. A princess, Lena, who was born with a rare gift. Unlike others, she didn't just control metal. Her body produced pure gold. A betrayal. Greedy warlords who saw her as nothing more than a treasure chest. A kidnapping. A desperate escape. And now, they were hunting her down. The vision ended, and Jack stumbled back, gasping. His mind reeled from the knowledge. Lena wasn't just an alien. She was royalty. She wasn't just in trouble. She was the most valuable being in the galaxy. Jack exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "So let me get this straight. You're a princess. You make gold. And now a bunch of bad guys want to turn you into a walking money machine." Lena nodded solemnly. Jack let out a long sigh. "Yeah, that sounds about right." He glanced at the tunnel ahead, his mind racing. He should have just left the planet when he had the chance. This was way above his pay grade. But now, he was in too deep. And if Lena was going to survive, she needed someone who could outthink, outfight, and outlast anyone coming for her. Jack clenched his fists. The hunters wanted gold. Well, they were about to get a fight instead. The chase begins. The air inside the tunnel was thick and warm, filled with the scent of old stone and metal. Jack's heart was still pounding from the vision Lena had shared with him. The images of her golden city, the betrayal, and the hunt that followed made his skin crawl. He glanced at Lena, who walked beside him, her silver-blue skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Her expression was tense, her golden eyes darting around as if expecting danger at any moment. Jack sighed. She wasn't wrong. Outside, the bounty hunters were closing in. And if they found this hidden passage, they were dead, hunted in the dark. Jack forced himself to focus. They needed to keep moving. He could hear the distant hum of bounty hunter drones hovering above the canyon. The hunters were scanning the area, trying to find any trace of Lena. He turned to her. "How long does this tunnel go?" Lena didn't answer with words. Instead, she pressed her hand against the tunnel wall, and the golden veins shivered in response. Jack could feel the ground humming beneath them, as if something ancient was stirring. Then, suddenly, Lena winced. Jack saw her knees weaken. He rushed forward, catching her before she collapsed. "Whoa, hey, what's wrong?" Lena clenched her teeth. The glow from the walls flickered. Jack frowned. Was she connected to this place? Before he could ask, a deep metallic boom echoed through the tunnel. Jack tensed. That wasn't good. A second later, his radio crackled to life. "Jack." A cold shiver ran down his spine. He knew that voice. Reagan. The bounty hunter's call. Jack pulled out his old radio, staring at it with narrowed eyes. Reagan was a name he had hoped never to hear again. A ruthless bounty hunter, part cyborg, part nightmare. "Jack," Reagan's voice came again, smooth and cruel. "I know you're in there. I know you have something valuable with you." Jack clenched his jaw. Damn it. Reagan let out a small chuckle. "Look, buddy, I don't want to kill you. You hand over the girl, and I make sure you walk away richer than you ever dreamed. Gold, ships, a house on a paradise planet, whatever you want." Jack's grip on the radio tightened. Tempting. He glanced at Lena. She was watching him, her golden eyes full of fear, but also something else. Trust. Jack cursed under his breath. He wasn't that kind of man. He pressed the radio button. "Reagan, you always were an ugly bastard. You know what's funny? You still think I trust you." Silence. Then a low chuckle. "Shame," Reagan said. "I was hoping you'd be smart." Then, without warning, boom! The tunnel behind them exploded. Run or die. The force of the blast sent Jack and Lena flying forward. Rocks rained down from above, shaking the entire tunnel. Dust filled the air, making it impossible to see. Jack coughed, trying to clear his lungs. Lena. He reached out blindly, his fingers brushing against her arm. She coughed, gripping his hand tightly. Jack turned and saw a massive hole where the tunnel entrance had been. Beyond it, he could see the glowing red eyes of Reagan's drones, scanning the dust. They had found them. Run! Jack grabbed Lena's hand and sprinted forward. A desperate escape. The tunnel sloped downward, twisting and turning like an underground maze. Jack didn't know where it led, but right now, anywhere was better than behind them. Lena struggled to keep up. She was still weak, her body shaking from whatever energy she had used to open the tunnel earlier. Jack gritted his teeth and pulled her forward. Behind them, he could hear the mechanical whir of drones entering the tunnel. Reagan wasn't wasting time. Jack's mind raced. He needed a plan. Up ahead, the tunnel split into two paths, left or right. Jack had no time to think. He pulled Lena left. As soon as they turned the corner, Jack grabbed a mining charge from his belt and slammed it against the tunnel wall. "Cover your ears," he shouted. Boom! The tunnel collapsed behind them, cutting off the drones. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then the radio crackled to life again. "Jack," Reagan's voice was amused. "You're only making this harder for yourself." Jack smirked. "Yeah, that's kinda my thing." Then he turned and kept running. The underground city. The tunnel walls began to change. The rough stone turned smooth. The golden veins became brighter, pulsing like veins of a living creature. Lena suddenly pulled away from Jack, her breath catching. Jack frowned. What is it?" Lena didn't answer. She just ran ahead. Jack followed her, his legs aching. And then, the tunnel opened into a massive underground chamber. Jack skidded to a stop, his eyes widening. They stood on the edge of an ancient city. Golden towers stretched high into the cavern ceiling, covered in strange alien symbols. Bridges of pure metal connected buildings that floated without support. The entire place pulsed with energy, as if it was alive. Jack exhaled. "What the hell is this place?" Lena turned to him, her golden eyes shining. She placed a hand on her chest. "Home." Jack's stomach dropped. This was where she came from. But something was wrong. The city was silent. There were no people. No signs of life. Jack's gut twisted. Something happened here. Something bad. Before he could say anything, a deep metallic rumble echoed through the cavern. Jack and Lena turned just in time to see a massive ship descending from above. Reagan had found them. And this time, he wasn't alone. Escape plan and a dangerous betrayal. The massive ship descended into the cavern, its engines humming with a deep, ominous vibration. Red lights flickered along its metallic hull, casting long shadows over the golden city. Jack felt his stomach tighten. Reagan had found them. Lena stood frozen beside him, her glowing golden eyes locked onto the ship. Jack could feel her body trembling. Not with fear, but with something else. Pain. This was her home. Or at least it had been. But now, it was silent. Empty. Jack had no time to think about what happened here. They had to move. The ship's landing gear extended with a mechanical hiss, dust and debris swirling beneath its massive bulk. Jack could already see dark figures moving inside the ship. Reagan didn't come alone. Jack grabbed Lena's hand. "We need to get out of here. Now." She didn't resist. She let him pull her deeper into the ruined city. The ghosts of the Golden City. The streets were eerily quiet. Jack's boots clanked against the golden metal roads, but there were no other sounds, no voices, no movement. It was as if the city had been abandoned in a hurry. Strange floating structures hovered in the air, slowly rotating as if waiting for someone to command them. Ancient machines lined the streets, covered in dust, but still glowing faintly. Jack turned to Lena. What happened here? She looked around, her face filled with sorrow. Then she pressed a hand to one of the glowing metal walls. The city reacted. A burst of golden light shot through the walls, spreading outward like veins in a living creature. Jack watched in awe as the empty streets suddenly came alive with holographic images. Memories. The images showed her people, tall, elegant beings with metallic skin and golden eyes, just like Lena. They walked the streets, laughed, worked. Then, chaos. Jack saw warriors in black armor storming the city. Explosions ripped through the golden towers. The people ran, screaming. He saw Lena's parents, royalty, being dragged away by monstrous figures. The last image froze on a massive throne room, torn apart by battle. Then the light faded. The city returned to its eerie silence. Jack exhaled. Dan. Lena lowered her hand, clenching her fists. She was the last of them. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry. But they didn't have time to grieve. A voice echoed through the streets. Jack. Jack tensed. Reagan. A hunter's trap. Jack spun around and saw a hologram of Reagan projected from the ship. The bounty hunter's cybernetic eye flickered red, scanning the area. His voice was smooth, almost amused. I have to admit, Jack, I wasn't expecting you to lead me to such a jackpot. This place is fascinating. Jack clenched his jaw. Go to hell, Reagan. Reagan chuckled. Now. No need to be rude. You're a smart man, Jack. So let's talk business. Jack didn't respond. He just grabbed Lena's wrist and kept walking. But then Reagan said something that made Jack freeze. You don't have to run, Jack, because I already have someone who's willing to make a deal. Jack's blood went cold. A second figure appeared in the hologram. A familiar face. Vex. Jack's hands curled into fists. You son of a... Vex grinned. Hey, buddy. Long time no see. Jack knew this was bad. Vex was a traitor, a smuggler, and a backstabbing bastard. He and Jack had worked together before, until Vex tried to sell him out for a quick payday. And now he was working with Reagan. You see, Vex continued, I did a little digging. Turns out, our lovely little alien princess here is worth more than just gold. Her DNA is priceless. Every major faction in the galaxy would kill to get their hands on her. Jack's stomach twisted. This wasn't just about money anymore. They didn't just want Lena's gold. They wanted her, alive or dead. A deal with the devil. Here's the deal, Jack, Reagan said. Hand over the girl, and you walk away free. You even get a nice little pile of gold for your troubles. Enough to disappear forever. Jack knew what Reagan was really saying. Hand her over, or die. Lena's hand gripped Jack's tightly. She didn't understand all the words, but she knew betrayal when she saw it. Jack closed his eyes, thinking fast. He had two options. Try to fight his way out. Terrible idea. Try to outsmart them. Still a terrible idea, but slightly less suicidal. Jack smirked. Yeah, he'd take option 2. He pressed the radio button. All right, Reagan. Let's make a deal. Lena tensed beside him. Jack squeezed her hand slightly, a silent message. Trust me. Reagan chuckled. Smart man. Jack took a deep breath. I'll hand her over. But I want to do it on my terms. No funny business. Reagan laughed. Of course, Jack. I wouldn't dream of it. Liar. Jack turned to Lena. He whispered, follow my lead. And when I say run, run. She nodded slowly. Jack exhaled. Time to bluff his way out of this. The betrayal. Reagan's men marched into the Golden City, their weapons glowing. Vex stood beside them, grinning like the smug traitor he was. Jack led Lena toward them, pretending to look defeated. Reagan smiled. Good choice, Jack. You always were a survivor. Jack smirked. Yeah, that's kinda my thing. Then, in one swift motion, Jack grabbed Vex's blaster from his holster and fired. Boom! The shot hit one of Reagan's men, sending him flying. Jack spun, grabbed Lena's wrist, and shouted, "Run!" Lena bolted. Jack fired wildly, forcing the bounty hunters to scatter. Reagan roared in anger. "Jit them!" Jack grabbed a detonator from his belt, slammed it against one of the golden buildings, and triggered the charge. Boom! The explosion tore through the city, causing golden structures to collapse in a massive chain reaction. Jack and Lena sprinted through the chaos. The bounty hunters tried to chase them, but the collapsing buildings blocked their path. Jack grabbed Lena and dived into a hidden tunnel. As the dust settled, Jack let out a breathless laugh. That went well. Lena smirked. Jack, crazy. Jack grinned. Yeah, I get that a lot. But the danger wasn't over yet. Reagan was still alive. And he wasn't done with them. The truth about her origins. The tunnel was dark and damp, the walls humming with faint golden veins that pulsed like a heartbeat. Jack leaned against the cold metal, trying to catch his breath. His pulse was still hammering from the explosive escape they had just pulled off. Beside him, Lena sat on the ground, panting. Her glowing golden eyes flickered with exhaustion, but there was something else in them too, determination. Jack ran a hand through his dust-covered hair. "All right, princess, I think it's time you tell me the whole damn story." Lena hesitated, then slowly pressed her hand against the tunnel wall. A wave of golden energy pulsed outward, illuminating the space around them. The walls shimmered, and suddenly, images appeared, floating in the air like ghosts of the past. Jack watched in awe as the history of her people unfolded before his eyes. The lost kingdom of Oris. The first image showed a breathtaking city of gold, floating among the stars. Its towers stretched high, glowing with energy, and the people moved gracefully, their bodies shimmering like living metal. "This is your home?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lena nodded. "Oris." Jack took a deep breath. He had heard rumors of a lost civilization of golden beings, but most people dismissed it as a myth, just a legend whispered among space travelers. But it was real. More images flashed before him. Scenes of the Oris people shaping metal with their minds, crafting impossible structures with nothing but their will. They were more than just aliens. They were gods of metal. Jack saw a massive throne room lined with rivers of liquid gold. On the throne sat a tall figure with Lena's golden eyes and shimmering skin. Lena placed a hand on her chest. "My father, the king." Jack exhaled sharply. Lena wasn't just any princess. She was the heir to a fallen empire. Then the images changed. The betrayal and the fall. The golden city darkened. The air filled with the sound of alarms, explosions ripping through the towers. Jack saw shadowy figures invading Oris, wearing armor as black as deep space. Lena's breath hitched as she watched. The Oris people fought back, but they weren't warriors. They were creators, dreamers. The invaders were something else entirely, merciless, relentless. And at the center of it all, Jack saw a man standing beside the enemy leader, a traitor. Lena's hands clenched into fists. "Who is he?" Jack asked. Lena's face darkened. "My uncle." Jack's eyes widened. "Your own family sold you out." Lena nodded. "He wanted power. The throne." The final images showed the king and queen being taken away. Lena, just a child, was hidden by her caretakers. The last thing she saw before her home fell was her uncle standing beside the invaders, smiling. Then the vision faded, leaving them in darkness once more. Jack leaned back against the wall. "Damn," he muttered. "That's messed up." Lena hugged her knees. "I only survivor." Jack looked at her. She wasn't just running from bounty hunters. She was running from an empire that wanted her erased. Jack sighed. Well, Princess, I hate to break it to you, but I think they found you. Lena looked up, confused, and then the tunnel began to shake. The enemy returns. A loud explosion rocked the cavern, and suddenly, a section of the tunnel collapsed inward. Jack and Lena barely had time to react before a dozen armored figures dropped in. Jack's heart sank. Reagan's men. They had found them. Reagan himself strode forward, his cybernetic eye glowing in the dim light. He gave a slow clap. That was a touching little history lesson. Jack. Really, I almost shed a tear. Jack scowled. Didn't take you long to crawl in here. Reagan smirked. Please, you think I didn't have your ship bugged? You led me straight to the jackpot. Jack cursed under his breath. Of course. Reagan turned his gaze to Lena. So, little princess, you finally ran out of places to hide. Lena's golden eyes flared with defiance. She may have been scared, but she wasn't going down without a fight. Jack stepped in front of her. I don't suppose I can convince you to let this one go. Reagan laughed. Oh, Jack, you really are stupid sometimes. He pulled out his blaster. Step aside, or I'll step over your corpse. Jack sighed dramatically. Well, if you're gonna kill me, at least let me say something first. Reagan rolled his eyes. Fine. Make it quick. Jack smirked. Lena. Now. The power of Horus. Before Reagan could react, Lena slammed her hands against the ground. The golden veins in the tunnel blazed with light. Suddenly, the walls started to move. Jack barely had time to dive out of the way as metallic spikes shot up from the floor, knocking Reagan's men backward. The tunnel came alive, shifting and twisting, trapping the bounty hunters in a storm of liquid gold. Reagan roared. What is TAS? Jack grabbed Lena's hand and pulled her back toward the city ruins. Let's move before they figure it out. The two of them raced through the collapsing tunnel, dodging falling debris and walls shifting behind them. Reagan and his men struggled, but Lena's power was too strong. Jack grinned. You've been holding out on me, princess. Lena gave a breathless smile. Surprise. They reached an opening in the tunnel, where an old Horus transport ship sat covered in dust. Jack's eyes widened. Please tell me this thing still flies. Lena ran to the controls and pressed her hand against them. The ship hummed to life. Jack let out a relieved laugh. Oh, I am really starting to like you. The ship's engines roared, and just as Reagan broke free from the golden trap, Jack and Lena shot into the sky. Reagan screamed in rage as they vanished into the stars. But Jack knew this wasn't over. Reagan wasn't the type to give up. And worse, now that Lena's power had been revealed, every warlord, crime syndicate, and empire in the galaxy would be coming for her. Jack exhaled. Well, princess, you wanted to stop running. Lena turned to him, her golden eyes blazing. Now we fight. The ultimate showdown. The Horus transport ship roared through the dark expanse of space, its golden engines humming with ancient power. Jack gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles white. His heart was still pounding from their narrow escape. Beside him, Lena sat in the co-pilot's seat, her golden eyes staring intently at the navigation screen. Her face was set in determination, but Jack could see the exhaustion beneath it. She had just unleashed a power she barely understood, a power her enemies would kill for. Jack let out a breath, forcing himself to focus. They weren't safe yet. Behind them, the dark void of space cracked open. A massive warship emerged from hyperspace, its black hull reflecting no light. Jack's stomach twisted. Reagan wasn't done yet. No escape, no mercy. The warship's massive cannons rotated, locking onto their tiny transport. Jack's fingers flew over the controls. Hang on. The ship dove sharply, narrowly dodging a blazing plasma blast that cut through the darkness. Lena gasped, gripping the armrests. They Fast. Jack grimaced. Yeah, tell me about it. Another shot erupted from the warship, just missing their left engine. Jack cursed under his breath. Damn it, we don't have the firepower to fight that thing. Lena's eyes flickered with urgency. Where go? Jack checked the scanners. The only thing nearby was a dead moon, orbiting a dying planet. It was barren, rocky, and covered in storms. Not my first choice, but he pulled the controls hard. Hold on. The transport lurched toward the moon, entering its gravity well just as another blast from Reagan's warship tore past them. The moment they hit the atmosphere, the ship began shaking violently. The winds howled, slamming against the hull like an angry beast. Jack's teeth clenched. Come on, stay together, baby. The controls flashed red. A warning klaxon blared. Then, bang. The right engine exploded. The ship spun wildly, tumbling toward the surface like a falling comet. Crash landing and the hunter's arrival. Jack barely managed to keep the ship from breaking apart. They hit the ground hard, skidding across the rocky surface before finally slamming into the base of a jagged canyon. Silence. Jack groaned, pushing himself up. His head was spinning. The cockpit was filled with smoke. Sparks flickered from the shattered control panels. Beside him, Lena stirred. Jack. Jack coughed. Yeah, I'm alive. Mostly. Lena looked out the viewport. The storm raged outside, thick clouds swirling over the barren landscape. Jack grabbed his blaster and unstrapped his seatbelt. Come on, we need to move before. Boom! The ship shook violently. Jack's stomach dropped. Outside, Reagan's warship loomed overhead. Several dropships detached, streaking toward the surface like predatory birds. Jack exhaled. Well, we're officially out of options. Lena's golden eyes narrowed. She slowly stood up, her expression unreadable. Jack gave her a look. I know that face. That's the I have a crazy idea face. She turned to him, determination burning in her gaze. No more running. Jack sighed. You do realize there's an army coming to kill us, right? Lena stepped forward, placing her hand on the shattered control panel. Golden light rippled through the ship. Jack's breath caught. The metal was responding to her. She turned back to him. Time to fight. The ambush. The storm raged outside as the first dropships landed. The bounty hunters moved like shadows in the darkness, their red visors glowing as they spread out across the rocky terrain. Reagan stepped out of the lead dropship, his cybernetic eye scanning the wreckage. His massive plasma rifle hummed in his hands. Find them, he ordered. And this time, no playing around. Kill the human. Bring me the girl alive. The hunters fanned out, moving cautiously toward the crashed ship. Then, the ground beneath them shifted. Before anyone could react, golden spires erupted from the earth, slamming into the bounty hunters like massive spears. Screams filled the air as some were crushed, others impaled. Reagan snarled, raising his rifle, only for a massive golden wall to rise in front of him, blocking his path. From the shadows, Jack opened fire. Blaster bolts lit up the darkness, cutting down bounty hunters as they scrambled for cover. From the top of a jagged rock formation, Lena stepped forward. Her golden eyes blazed like twin suns. The wind tore through her silver-blue hair, her hands raised high. And the planet itself answered her call. The power of a lost queen. The ground trembled. The metal hidden beneath the rocky surface rose, twisting and shifting under Lena's control. The bounty hunters screamed as the battlefield came alive. Weapons were ripped from their hands, armor was crushed against their bodies, and the very earth turned against them. Reagan growled. Enough. He charged forward, aiming his plasma rifle straight at Lena. Jack saw it. Lena. Reagan fired. The plasma bolt shot toward Lena, moving too fast. But then, the air shimmered. A golden shield formed in front of her, the plasma bolt disintegrating on impact. Reagan's eyes widened. What? Lena stepped forward. The metal around her rose like a living storm. You hunted me, she said softly. Her voice echoed with power. You tried to steal my people's legacy. You tried to erase me. Rhaegon snarled. You're just a kid. Lena lifted her hand. The ground beneath Rhaegon collapsed. He screamed as massive golden chains shot from the earth, wrapping around his body. His rifle clattered to the ground. Jack walked up beside Lena, whistling. Wow. Remind me never to piss you off. Rhaegon struggled, cursing. You think this is over? He spat. There are more like me, more coming. You can't stop them all. Lena's golden eyes glowed brightly. Watch me. With a single motion, she closed her fist. The golden chains tightened, and Rhaegon's cybernetic body shattered under their grip. With one final, crushing sound, Rhaegon was gone. Silence fell over the battlefield. Jack exhaled. Damn. Remind me never to bet against you. Lena turned to him. Not over. Jack blinked. What do you mean? She pointed to the sky. Jack followed her gaze and saw an entire fleet emerging from hyperspace. The real war had just begun. A new beginning. Jack stared up at the sky, his heart pounding like a war drum. The fleet was enormous. Massive capital ships loomed over the battlefield like floating fortresses. Their hulls were black as midnight, their engines glowing with eerie red light. This wasn't just a hunting party anymore. This was a full-scale invasion. Lena stood beside him, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the stormy night. The wind pulled at her silver-blue hair, but she didn't move, didn't flinch. She simply stared at the approaching warships, her expression unreadable. Jack tightened his grip on his blaster. So, do you have a plan for this, or are we just gonna wing it? Lena turned to him. Fight, she said. Jack let out a nervous chuckle. Yeah, I figured you'd say that. The ground beneath them shook violently as the first warship began descending, its landing thrusters kicking up massive clouds of dust and debris. More dropships followed, dark shapes breaking through the clouds. Jack counted at least 100 soldiers. Maybe more. And the worst part. At the front of it all, standing tall on a sleek, black command platform, was a man Jack had seen in Lena's visions. A man with golden eyes. A man wearing a crown of black metal. Lena's uncle. The traitor. The one who had sold out her family. Jack felt Lena's hand tighten into a fist. Her breathing was controlled, steady, but her entire body trembled with rage. The traitor smiled. And then he spoke. The final offer. Lena, he called out, his voice smooth and commanding. At last, you stop running. His golden eyes flickered with something like amusement. You've made this far more difficult than it needed to be, but you were always stubborn, weren't you? Lena didn't move. The traitor stepped forward, raising his hands as if offering peace. Come with me. End this foolishness. I will spare your life, and the human as well. Jack raised an eyebrow. Oh, how generous. The traitor smirked. Do not mistake my kindness for weakness, human. You are irrelevant. The princess, however, is mine. Lena's fists clenched tighter. Jack could feel power radiating from her. Then she spoke. No. The traitor sighed. So predictable. He gestured lazily with one hand. Kill the human. Bring me the girl. And with that, the invasion began. The battle of the fallen city. The enemy soldiers charged. Jack raised his blaster and fired. A bounty hunter collapsed, his armor sparking from the shot. Another lunged at him. Jack spun, smashing the butt of his rifle into the attacker's helmet. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Lena lifted her hands, and the planet itself responded. The ground rippled, golden veins bursting to life. Spires of pure metal shot from the earth, impaling the first wave of enemy soldiers. The traitor's face darkened. So you've learned a few tricks. He raised his own hand, and suddenly, The golden spires trembled. Jack's stomach dropped. He could control metal too. With a flick of his fingers, the spires Lena had raised shattered into dust. Jack barely had time to pull Lena back as a massive golden blade slashed through the air where she had just been standing. Lena's eyes widened. The traitor smiled. "You think you are strong, child. You are nothing." Lena growled and threw her hands forward. The entire battlefield shifted. The ancient ruins of her people, the very structures her ancestors had built, rose into the sky. Buildings floated. Bridges snapped free from gravity. The entire city became her weapon. Jack stood in awe as Lena and her uncle clashed, throwing entire chunks of a lost civilization at each other like gods battling for control of the cosmos. But Jack wasn't just going to stand around and watch. He sprinted toward one of the fallen enemy soldiers, grabbing a pulse grenade from the guy's belt. Then he saw it. One of the command ships had landed. He grinned. "Lena, keep him busy," Jack shouted. Without waiting for a response, he ran straight toward the enemy fleet. The heist of the century. Jack weaved through enemy fire, dodging plasma bolts as he sprinted toward the command ship. He could hear Lena and the traitor tearing apart the battlefield behind him. But he had one job: steal the biggest gun in the sky. As he reached the ship's entrance, 2 guards turned. Jack threw the grenade. Boom! The explosion sent them flying. Jack dashed up the ramp. "All right, let's see what kind of firepower you've got in here." Inside, the ship was crawling with crew members. Jack raised his blaster. "All right, everybody, get out or get shot." The crew hesitated. Jack fired a warning shot. They ran. He smirked. "Thought so." Jack rushed to the controls and looked over the interface. It was alien tech, way more advanced than what he was used to. "All right, let's press some buttons and hope for the best." He slammed his fist on what looked like the biggest, most important button. Outside, the ship's main cannon powered up. The final strike. Jack spun the cannon to face the battlefield. Lena was locked in combat with her uncle, the two of them hurling golden weapons at each other in a battle of pure will. But Jack could see it. Lena was tiring. The traitor was winning. Jack gritted his teeth. "Not today, buddy." He aimed the cannon directly at the traitor. Then he fired. The entire battlefield lit up. A blast of pure energy erupted from the cannon, striking the traitor dead on. The explosion rippled across the ruins, sending shockwaves through the city. When the dust settled, the traitor was gone, and Lena was still standing. Jack exhaled. That actually worked. Then the ship shook violently. Jack cursed. The rest of the fleet was still up there. They needed to leave. Now. A new beginning. Jack sprinted back to Lena. She was breathing heavily, her hands shaking. "It's over," Jack said. Lena looked at him. "Not over." She pointed to the sky. The fleet was still there. Jack sighed. "So what do we do?" Lena turned back to the ruined city. Her home. Her legacy. She stepped forward, and the entire battlefield responded. The ground cracked open. The city's ancient power surged into the sky, and for the first time in centuries, Oris awoke. The fleet above them shattered. The enemy was gone. Jack let out a slow breath. "You really are something else, princess." Lena turned to him, her golden eyes soft. "Not princess." Jack raised an eyebrow. Lena smiled. "Queen. The end, or the beginning." As their stolen ship rose into the stars, Jack leaned back in the pilot's seat. "So, now what?" Lena turned to him. "Now, we rebuild." Jack grinned. "Guess I'm sticking around then." And as their ship vanished into the depths of space, a new legend was born. The Queen of Oris had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same.